Hello everyone, my name is Dino Ignacio. Welcome to Rebelthon Strikes Back. This is a fundraiser for UNICEF. Last year, Rebelthon raised $15,000 for UNICEF, and we'd like to see if we can top that this year. Today we're speaking with Kris Sanders, and if you like this interview, please consider donating. If you don't like this interview, please still consider donating. So without further ado, let's introduce Kris. He's a puppeteer and droid builder, and he's worked with Disney and Lucasfilm over the last many years, since the 2000s. He's worked in other awesome places as well, so let's learn about him. Kris, how are you doing today?
Hey, good. How are you doing? It's nice to meet you, and thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for your time. It's an amazing honor to hang out with you today. I'm an amateur droid builder myself, so there's a lot of stuff that I'm interested personally in learning. But yeah, before we get deep into like all the amazing droids that you've worked on, can you speak to your upbringing, where you're from, your education, and just basic stuff about yourself?
So I was born in South Carolina in the early 70s, and I'd like to think that I was kind of always a maker at heart. I saw Star Wars at a relatively young age. I think I was 4 when the first one came out. But even then, I do remember like it captivated my imagination. I kind of wanted to know everything there was about special effects and animatronics and how things worked. So that kind of led me down a path of wanting to learn about electronics and how movie magic happened. And so I really focused my attention into that. That led me into wanting to take electronics classes in school and just trying to figure out how things went together and what would make things happen, because I wanted to make my stuff. I wanted to build the things I saw in the movies, but make it mine. So that's kind of where it all started, and that's kind of what led me to where I'm at now.
That's fascinating. And so you mentioned a little bit earlier you were born in 1973. I was 1974, so I'm from that same cohort. I know exactly that time and moment that you grew up in as well. I feel like I have memories of seeing Return of the Jedi in the theaters, but my dad tells me he brought me in for Empire Strikes Back. I don't think I saw the first movie in Betamax, as I remember, but much like you, there was this dream of like, one day I'd love to own a droid, I'd love to have a lightsaber. And so I sort of have that same background in that I love, how do I make the world of Star Wars tactile for myself? It was really fascinating. But on that, I'd love to learn more about your work history. So how did you get started? What was your education like? And what brought you to where you are now?
So my educational background is in electronics design and fabrication. And you've built a droid, so you know that it's not like you can go to a school that's going to teach you exactly what you need to do to build a droid. That's going to be something you're going to have to be willing to, play with and tinker with and, try and fail, right? But there's a great community of builders out there that's willing to help everyone through the process. Before I reached that point, though, I was doing events with the 501st. So I was Darth Vader, and a friend of mine, Jim Epps, was a stormtrooper, and another friend of ours, Chris Bartlett, who you guys might know as Zero on The Mandalorian, and he's played other characters on the show, he was Boba Fett. Well, Chris decided he wanted to be C-3PO. And to go along with 3PO, we had to have R2, so he encouraged me to build R2. Chris finished his build and put some videos up on YouTube, which were seen by Lucasfilm. And when they saw that, they contacted him to do an event for them. After he completed that event, and that went well, they decided to use him for a second event, which was like a McDonald's commercial. This was 2008, that was filmed in New York. And they asked him, do you know anybody that can do R2 for this? And he threw my name in the hat. So they contacted me and, gave me the opportunity to perform as R2 for this commercial. And, so we traveled to New York, and it was just a whirlwind of an event. It was, pretty amazing. And it was my first time being on a large set. And inside of this building, they had an entire bridge of a spaceship built, and they had, all the lights and sounds and just everything that was going on. It was pretty amazing to see it all. So that was my first event, and after that, it just started snowballing from there.
So what was it like to be a droid builder around then? Because if I remember right, 99, 98 was when we basically got the blueprints to start, from Lucasfilm to start building droids. So the accuracy level was still something we were figuring out. There wasn't a lot of resources back then. We were just starting to get it. What was that like, being there at that moment?
And so definitely back then, I feel like the parts were probably harder to obtain. There were fewer builders out there actually in the club, so there were fewer people actually manufacturing the parts. But there's still been a good collection, a good community amongst the people trying to help each other, further their builds. For me, I had a mixed collection of parts, some that were obtained through other builders, and several that I had manufactured myself. We've already mentioned, there's no rule book on how you build a droid, so that's to me a good thing, which means there's no two droids that are identical. Each one is unique, and they have their own features, kind of put into it by the person who built it. Throughout the years, I have kind of changed, my approach towards building. I started off with all the bells and whistles. I wanted everything that I could see R2 possibly doing, doing that. I've done a lot of events which have required long use and all-day use out of the droid, so reliability was a big concern. So over the years, I've kind of went away from how much could I do, but how reliable could I actually make the droid.
Awesome to hear. It's like, there's like a desire in a builder, and again, I'm new to this. I've only been doing this since 2017, the building of droids, and for me, it's like, how do I cram as much of the features that I can that seem to exist in multiple different versions? People don't realize there's like, in the production, there's like 6 or 7 different droids doing very different things. One that goes from 2 to 3 legs, one that actually walks with a person inside, and so on and so forth, or something that shoots out something. But to a builder that's starting out like myself, the goal is like, how do I fit all this? But to your point, efficiency starts to go down when these are production droids, if you're trying to do so many things with one thing. I had not considered that. That's fascinating.
Well, so if you build a droid with a purpose, and what I mean by that is if you are tailoring it to be something specific, then you can always focus your attention on whatever that specific need is. So after I did the work with McDonald's, I started working with Disney World, and I provided R2-D2 for Star Wars Weekends, which was an event that ran in Orlando. The purpose that I was focusing on for that build was that it needed to be available for stage shows, parades, live meet and greets. Everything else that I had going on with R2 at that point, was just a failure point and a reduction in reliability. So I started focusing my attention at that time on what do I need to do to make it more reliable. I wanted to reduce weight, I wanted to reduce failure points, and I wanted to reduce complexity. There was multiple positives with that. I was able to, make it easier to service, less downtime, and reduce my stress for things that could go wrong when you're doing this many events. So one of the other things that, is a benefit to that is if you're doing a lot of live meet and greets, it doesn't take you long to figure out that every single time a kid sees a door open, they think to themselves, can I get my fingernails in there and open that door up? And nobody tells them stop quickly, so if you don't have all these things going on with the live meet and greets, then you won't have those failure points, and your reliability is going to go up.
No, that makes a lot of sense. As a droid builder, I tend to, obviously you put a lot of attention in building something, and obviously the kids are going to come and touch it. And then, so there's a part of you that thinks, oh my gosh, they might break it. But then you think about the reason you even built the droid, which is that you want something tactile out of the Star Wars universe. And the same is true with everyone who wants to come up to it and touch it. And so I think over the years, come to peace with the fact that the droid's job is to be touched. The droid's job is to be admired and loved. And kids will come and hug it. Maybe I've seen kids lick it. And I can't stop that. And so I've got to build a droid with that resilience in mind. And to your point, maybe that means moving to fiberglass, or maybe not having finicky parts, is what I'm probably imagining.
So definitely focusing on how you want to complete your droid is a major thing, right? Because there's no right way to do this. There is no rule book that says this is how an R2 has to be built. So one of the things you want to do is you want to build towards your budget. I mean, that's going to heavily influence what you choose. So, I mean, there's all metal droids out there. There's all 3D printed droids out there. So focusing on your budget, is going to be a major component. But then, like I said, thinking about what you're going to do with your droid. Is it going to be for meet and greets? So think about reliability. Is it going to be because you want to do videos and you want to show off every single possible thing that R2 could do? Then build towards that. But in the end of the day, figure out what your purpose is, build towards that.
That's great. This is a great segue. I want to learn about all the droids that you've worked on. Like, what have you built and what for over the years?
Well, so the majority of work that I've done has been building droids of the astromech variety. R2 is a huge fan favorite, so he gets requested all over the world. I did build mine with the ability to take it apart relatively easy, and it's light enough to put into a few crates and I can get on any commercial flight. That's given me contracts all over the world. I've also puppeteered other characters, and then a couple years ago I got connected with Respawn, and they were coming out with their game Jedi Fallen Order, and I got requested to bring this guy to life. So BD1's an awesome character in the game, and getting the opportunity to build this was just something I couldn't even imagine.
That's awesome. Let's jump to that real quick. I'd like to learn more about the process. Were you involved in actual design of the robot, or just the fabrication into reality?
So mostly the latter. So they had BD1, fully fleshed out as far as design goes and how they wanted it to look. But in the game world, the way they create their 3D models and the way you're gonna actually fabricate something is different, right? So you could take the game model and you could make it solid and print that. But as far as like having an opportunity to have a mechanical design in there, that just doesn't work out the same, right? So you have to think about that when you're designing it. So what I ended up doing was going back basically to the drawing board and saying, hey, I've got all of their stuff for visual content. I know exactly how to make it look, but then creating all new 3D models, and each one of those had mechanical functionality in mind as I went through the process.
That's awesome. Yeah, and looking at that robot, and I see it right over your shoulder, and playing the game, I love how much personality and cuteness it imbues in its simplicity, and I also love how it's got so many callbacks to the astromech in its legs and the way it's constructed. It feels so Star Wars, and I think a testament to your work here is that as someone who's also worked in games, when we build stuff in games, like our intention is just to make it look good for the game itself, and so the practicality or the physicality of it is nothing we really think about. So being able to translate something that was just meant to be a game asset into something that's practical, and knowing when where the seam lines are, or when the material change happens, or where to add structural integrity. That's a whole different skill. Can you speak to any of that?
Sure. So like, let's look the neck, for example, right? So there's the joint at the top of the neck that connects up to the head. In the game model, that was a lot thinner. And when I thought about the real world practicality of that, and how durable that was going to be, I just wasn't confident that was going to hold the test of time. So I contacted Respawn and said, hey, I want to redesign this for the model. And they were in agreement because we knew that it was going to travel all over the place and we wanted it to be durable. Anywhere else on the droid, like if there's not a stress load involved, or if it's not something that is mechanical, then the design of my model matches one-to-one with the design of the game model. So I wanted to maintain all of the fine detail, all of the little characteristics like inside the leg. All of that is exactly the same because that's not a mechanical component. So I was able to keep that the same. It traveled the world. It was tossed around by different air carriers, and ended up holding up very well. So those were the things that we kept in mind with it when designing this this type of a model.
So Kris, on that, speaking of like wiring and all that, what's the BD1 wired to do? What did you build into it?
So BD1 is a fairly complex droid, but most of that complexity is really driven by its size. Going into this, I was given basically 6 weeks start to finish to build this droid. It was a tight time frame, so I was going to be limited in what I could do. The other thing that was kind of driving it was I knew he was going to be used for stage events, live meet and greets, and television commercials. So I wasn't going to be able to control the environment he was in, so everything had to be self-contained. There was not going to be any external controllers, and any pigtails coming off of it. Everything had to be self-contained. Batteries, servos, motors, whatever. Everything had to be inside. So that led me to creating 2 separate systems. So there's a system in the body and there's a system in the head. And each one of those systems has its own power supply and its own radio receiver that talk back to a common controller. So in the body we have a motor and a series of belts and pulleys that run the head tilt mechanism. So that lets the head go up and down this way. It also has the amplifiers and the speaker and the audio controller. Then in the head we have servos that let the antennas move up and down, and then a servo that can let the eye on the front move around. Then we have the head spin mechanism and the controller for the lights, and a few other small features. So, when you look at this, I had 2 access points for the head. I had a head tilt and a head twist. But that's okay, because what I was able to do is, give the illusion of an additional access point, and you do that through puppeteering. So if I can move my head up and down and I can twist it from side to side, then what I can do in a scenario like that is, a meet and greet, for example, is going to have people in multiple locations. It's never going to be a single file line coming straight on and off. There's going to be people off to the side. So you're going to be able to play with people, and you're going to be able to, create movements that, like I'm saying, are an illusion. So if someone's off to the side and I twist the head this way and I tilt the head down, what they're seeing is the head tilt this way. So I looked at them straight on, then I tilted the head, this way or this way. That's a perceived axis that's not really there, because all that's really happening is that head tilt is still going up and down. The head just happens to be twisted sideways when it did that. So you can create this emotion and, give this character feelings that, we perceive when we look at, different head movements. And it's all, movie magic. It's an illusion. So it's a great way to, reduce the complexity of the droid, but still keep the animation there.
That's fascinating and genius. Whenever I watch those old animatronic setups from the Imagineers back in the 60s and 50s, that's basically what they did. Like, it's the illusion of life is even in the limited servos that they had, was in the combination and concert of like the 2 axes, and then suddenly you seem like you have a third one. That's really genius. That's great work. And to your point, again, it's all about reducing the complexity for the travel and the fact that it's going to be exposed to so many different locations. That's genius. That's great.
Well, with this one also, I was limited by the size. You can only fit so much in, so you kind of have to pick and choose what you want to do. A lot of people have said, hey, can BD1 walk? And the design of this one, it's all animatronic from the body portions up. The legs are stationary because we knew that it was going to be in different locations. It was going to be used in commercials and used on different sets. So we couldn't say, hey, we're going to have this whole control box underneath it where all this additional gear is going to live. So everything had to be self-contained within the droid itself. Power, wiring, motors, everything. So I needed to be able to set it at any location, on any surface, at any time. So, that alone limited what I was able to do with it. I'm sure with enough time and enough, engineering put into it, I could get more out of it, but one of the other things that comes with these kind of builds is a timeline,
yes.
Right? So it's not like you're given, hey, take the next 2 years and see what you can get out of this thing. I mean, it was literally a 6-week process from the time they said, yes, this project's a go, we need it complete on this date. That was a 6-week process. So there's only so much you're going to be able to do, from 3D modeling, building it, painting it, testing it, and then taking it to a location. There's only so much you can do in 6 weeks.
Yeah. So that's actually a great segue to my next question, which is, let's say time wasn't a factor and budget wasn't a factor. How, using current technology, how far are we from an actual walking BD1? Like, is that realistic yet?
I would say, how big can BD1 be, right? So, I mean, when you think about BD1, he's small. And when we look at the robots that are built from, companies like Boston Dynamics, who have, amazing stuff, I don't think I've ever seen anything quite this small. So BD1 is basically, around 20 inches tall, somewhere in that area. I mean, he can squat up and down, so there's no exact measurement there, but, let's say around 20 inches tall. And when you look at the joints in the knees and, areas where there would have to be motors, and the areas down around the feet, having something that exactly looked like BD1 that could walk around and be that stable, I just don't think we're there yet. I mean, now, do we have bipedal walking robots? Yeah, we do, but they're way, way bigger. They're not quite this small. Will we get there? Yeah, well, I'm sure we will. Eventually, there will be something this size that can walk around like that, no problem.
Yeah, no, the more I think about it, going back to like the idea of like size being part of the equation, part of that, from my understanding, a lot of those Boston Dynamic robots, translate its weight from one side to the other, and then the legs are doing a lot of microprocessing of like making sure that it's standing upright. So there's a lot in there that I think might be hard to fit in such a small chassis as a robot like that. But yeah, it'd be an interesting future when we get there, though.
I mean, I really do think it's only a matter of time. I mean, everything we have that's, science fiction, sooner or later becomes science fact. So, yeah, sooner or later, I do think someone would pull off having something this size walk around.
On that, like the next question that I wanted to ask was like having built both for parks, for games such as this, and other things. Like, can you speak to like the difference between making droids for movies versus games versus parks?
Well, so most of the droids I've built, and I would say the vast majority, have been for mixed media usage. And what I mean by that is like, the droids that would be in the park might be, on the stage at one moment, but then they might be doing a meet and greet at another moment. Or, like BD1, I knew all the scenarios that he would be in. So each component needed to be there to complete the character. But if I were building something for, say, a commercial or a television show that, was only going to be used in that scenario, I would leave out things like sound components, because I mean, all of those things are going to be done in post. So yeah, you take those kind of things into consideration when you're building for those specific applications. One of my favorite things to do is live meet and greets. I mean, I love that more than anything. So you definitely have to have everything in there for that to complete the character. Yeah, because I mean, you get those spontaneous moments, and you get to interact with people as if you are the character, so yeah, that's what I've loved the most. And so, like I said, any opportunity you can have to do that meet and greet, it might be if you're at an event and you're, it might be a stage show, but you might be off to the side and there might be someone there, that wants to have a moment with R2. So having the sound and all that kind of stuff, and it's just nice because you can always, be the character if the opportunity presents itself.
Yeah, no, speaking of that, like, and, when I bring up my droid, I usually take it to either, there's an event somewhere where there's lots of kids, or back before the pandemic, my daughter would take it out with me to the farmer's market here in West Seattle. And I wanted your thoughts on this because sometimes we go out there and we pretend to be invisible. Like we just let the droid roam and we let it seem real. But there are moments where I think maybe I should use this moment as a STEM moment. And so I stop and show the kids, I open up the droid and show them how it works and what buttons we press. And I wanted your thoughts. Like, where do you stand in all this? Are you the type of puppeteer that completes the illusion by being invisible? Or do you enjoy like using it as a teaching moment for technology and show how it works?
I really think that's kind of dictated by the event itself, right? So, for example, if I were in the parks, running R2, well, character integrity is going to be involved here. You're never going to go into the park and take R2's dome off and let someone see inside and start showing them around. And I would probably say that, in my opinion, I think that applies to, a majority of situations because, people want to experience the magic of Star Wars. So if you're, at a promotional event, or if you're doing a volunteer, like fundraiser, most people want to experience R2. There's going to be that group of people that want to see inside and want to know how it functions, but I feel like the mass majority want that character interaction, and they want to have a chance to feel like they're meeting the real R2D2. And so keeping that magic alive for them would require you not spoiling it, right? So you don't want to be seen there holding the controller. You want to kind of be off to the side somewhere. You want to kind of find a spot where you can kind of stay out of the way. But there are times when there is a good reason to let someone see inside. For example, I went to my daughter's school, and the whole point was an educational moment. She was in a class where they wanted to go over robotics and things like that. So I brought R2 in, but the beginning portion, we kept that magic. Character integrity was there. We kept R2 alive, did a little bit of a performance time, a little bit of meet and greet, and then we segued into a moment of education. And for example, like, let's think about Celebration. People go to Celebration. I think the mass majority want to experience that magic of meeting the characters they see on screen. But we have the builders rooms where you can walk through and you get both. You get to experience droids, in their full glory, fully assembled, interacting and coming to life. But then you also get to see ones that are builds in progress. So you get to see both sides of it. So I really think that the situation is kind of driven by the event itself. So if it's a educational driven event, then by all means bring people in and let them see the inside. That's going to find more people that are going to want to build droids eventually. And if it's not, then keep the character integrity and let people experience the magic of the moment.
That makes a lot of sense to me, and I'm taking that to heart. The whole concept of for you as a builder, like for me as a builder, there's a pride to showing off the insides. Just look what I did. But to the people seeing him, they want to see R2, and I'm taking that to heart. You're right. Breaking the illusion, there's a time for it, but for the most part, I think it's all about the magic and meeting the hero that is R2, right? That's thank you for that.
Yeah, I agree.
Closing off, I wanted to hear more about what's next for you and future projects. What are you working on right now? Is there anything you can talk about?
So that's a really good question. So, like the rest of the world, we've kind of been on hold with this pandemic, and so there was lots of plans that were in place for 2020, but we're still in a holding pattern on a lot of that, just while everybody's trying to figure out what direction things are moving in. We're definitely hoping that we can start moving forward on some of those plans, and that our new normal can kind of become our old normal. But in the meantime, I have been working on a lot of personal projects as far as props that I've wanted to build over the years, and I do like to build things that aren't necessarily in the Star Wars universe. So, I like testing myself every so often and trying to build something new and, do something that I haven't done before. My daughters are also into making things, so we've kind of been working on stuff together, projects and props, so, that's fun. I mean, we've tried to take this opportunity and this time, to, really develop our skills as far as what we can do and what we can make, and just to see where we can take things.
What kind of props are you building with the kids?
Originals, actually. So my one of my daughters is really into anime, and she likes creating her own characters. So we've been trying to look at ways that we can take what she's designed, bring that stuff to life. So that's been fun. She definitely did something major for this last Halloween, even though we weren't able to actually celebrate Halloween the way we normally like to, but she was still able to create new things to explore that time. And I encourage them to really explore their imagination and to try and figure out how to bring their imagination to life. And I like it when other builders are doing that too. Like there's droid builders out there that are creating droid designs that they've that they weren't in the movies. They're all new designs, and they're unique, and they're they have that Star Wars flair. So I really like that. I really like seeing people, including my kids, just take their imagination and figure out how, what they see, in their mind, they can actually bring it to life.
That's awesome and very inspiring. Thank you. And I'm so glad you're doing that with your kids. I find it to be so rewarding when you get to the point where your kids are mirroring the same interests and also getting to the point where they are teaching you stuff. Like they're figuring out stuff on their own. My daughter's just 9, but we're on that road as well, and it's inspiring to hear that you're doing the same thing with yours. On that,
Thanks.
oh, sorry, go on.
Oh, I said thanks.
Oh, yeah. On that, this is the end of my questions. Was there anything you wanted to share that I may have missed asking you?
No, nothing that I can think of.
Awesome. Well, on that, again, thank you everyone for watching. This was a really fun interview with Kris Sanders. Again, if you are interested in donating, please donate to UNICEF through Rebelthon Strikes Back. On that, Kris, thank you so much for your time. It goes without saying, it's really inspiring for me to talk to you right now and to hear from you, and just as a fellow droid builder, as a father, and as someone who's inspired by your work. It's been a real thrill for myself. I hope other people had as much fun as I did, because clearly this was a joy for me. I don't know if that's obvious, but thank you so much for your time, Kris.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and it's absolutely been my pleasure.
Awesome. And we can cut right there.